My name is Millie Cook, and I am 38 years old. People in Nashville look at me and see a lucky housewife who snagged a millionaire real estate tycoon. They see the designer clothes, bought with an allowance I had to beg for, and assume I have it all. But they do not know who I really am. They do not know that before I was Mrs. Grant White, I was a logistics captain in the United States Army. The moment the judge's gavel was about to come down, Grant, my husband, leaned over. His hot breath, heavy with the scent of expensive peppermint and stale bourbon, hit my ear. He whispered, low enough that only I could hear, but loud enough to shatter my soul. "You will never touch a dime of my money again, Millie. And tonight, Claire will be sleeping in the bed you spent 10 years keeping warm. You are just a useless little tin soldier." In the row behind us, my mother-in-law adjusted her pearls, smiling at my husband's mistress as if they were the real family. They thought I was trembling with fear. But they were wrong. I was not shaking from fear. I was executing radio silence discipline before H hour. Under the boring stack of divorce papers on the table, my hand was resting on a white envelope sealed with a red federal stamp. Grant thinks this is a divorce court. He does not know he is walking into a criminal trial. Comment, justice below, and subscribe right now if you want to witness the exact moment an arrogant man's smile is extinguished forever. I sat with my back perfectly straight, creating a rigid 90-degree angle against the hard mahogany chair. My heels were locked together, touching at the instep, exactly as the drill sergeants at Fort Campbell had taught me 20 years ago. I was wearing a cheap, off-the-rack gray suit from a department store clearance rack, but in my mind, I was in full dress uniform. The federal courtroom in Nashville was freezing, the kind of artificial chill that seeps into your bones, but it was not nearly as cold as the look Judge Eleanor Green gave me. She peered over her spectacles, listening to Grant's lawyer, a man with a thick southern drawl and a suit that cost more than my father's car. "Your Honor," the lawyer droned on, pacing theatrically before the bench. "My client, Mr. White, is the sole economic pillar of this family. Ms. Cook here has been unemployed for 5 years. She has contributed absolutely nothing to the household finances. She is, for lack of a better word, a dependent, a parasite on my client's hard-earned success." Parasite. The word hung in the sterile air like smoke. Useless. Leech. I looked down at my hands, resting calmly on the table. They were red and rough from scrubbing floors and gardening without gloves, because Grant refused to pay for a landscaping service. These same hands used to sign logistics orders moving tons of heavy artillery and medical supplies across hostile borders. These hands had saved lives. Now, according to the state of Tennessee, they were good for nothing but scrubbing toilets. The injustice rose in my throat like bile, hot and acidic, but I swallowed it down. In the military, emotion is a luxury. On the battlefield, panic gets you killed. I allowed myself a single tactical glance over my shoulder. The sight was a dagger aimed straight at my heart. Lydia White, my mother-in-law, sat in the front row of the gallery. This was a woman who chaired the White Hope Charity Foundation, a woman who quoted Proverbs every Sunday morning at the First Baptist Church. Yet here she was, gently patting the hand of Claire Davis, my husband's 24-year-old assistant. They were whispering to each other, giggling softly behind their manicured hands as if they were watching a romantic comedy, not the legal dismantling of a 10-year marriage. Then I saw it. The dress. Claire was wearing a slip dress made of deep crimson silk. My breath hitched in my chest for a fraction of a second. 6 months ago, I had touched that exact dress in a boutique window downtown. I had asked Grant for it. He had laughed, telling me it was far too extravagant for someone who doesn't bring in a paycheck. "Maybe next year, Millie, if you learn to budget the grocery money better," he had said. Now, that silk was draped over the body of the woman destroying my home. My husband's money, our money, was quite literally wrapping her in luxury while I sat here in polyester. Their audacity wasn't just immoral, it was a declaration of war. It was a clear signal that in the hierarchy of the White family, the mistress outranked the wife. Suddenly, a shadow fell over me. Grant shifted in his seat, invading my personal space. The smell hit me first. Creed Aventus. It was an aggressive, musky scent with notes of pineapple and birch. It used to be the smell of the man I loved. Now it smelled like betrayal and arrogance. He did not look at me. His eyes remained fixed on the judge, playing the role of the grieving, burdened husband perfectly. But his lips barely moved as he whispered out of the side of his mouth, his voice a low hiss. "You see this, Millie? You have nothing. No money. No connections. No one believes you. You are going to walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back. I will make sure you never show your face in high society Nashville again. You are just a pawn, Millie, a temporary placeholder." His voice dripped with the confidence of a man who has never lost a battle because he buys the referees. He thought he had won. He interpreted my silence as submission. He thought I was the broken housewife, paralyzed by the fear of poverty. He did not know the first rule of combat. The person making the most noise is usually the first one to die. I did not flinch. I did not turn to slap him, though every nerve in my body screamed for it. I simply shifted my hand, moving it 2 inches to the right until my fingertips rested on the cool surface of a white A4-sized envelope sitting on the table. It looked innocent, just a packet of paper. But inside that envelope was not a plea for alimony. It was the product of 60 sleepless nights. It contained bank statements from offshore accounts Grant thought were hidden. It held transcripts of voice recordings captured in the dead of night. It held grainy photographs taken through the crack of a study door. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thump, 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 thump. But my breathing remained slow and rhythmic. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. Wait, I told myself. Hold the line. Grant White thinks this is the end of his marriage. He thinks he is discarding a used toy. He's wrong. This is not an end. This is H hour. And the counterattack of Captain Millie Cook is about to begin. My fingers traced the edge of the envelope, and for a split second, my mind flashed back. This wasn't the first time a white envelope had defined my worth in this family. I remembered another envelope, 5 years ago, on a day that was supposed to be a celebration. That was the day the soldier in me was put to sleep, and the prisoner was born. My fingertips brushed against the cold, smooth paper of the white envelope on the courtroom table. The sensation sent a jolt of electricity straight to the base of my skull, dragging me back in time. This was not the first time a white envelope had determined my fate. I was suddenly no longer in a federal courtroom. I was back in the suffocating humidity of a Nashville summer 5 years ago. That was the year I made the biggest tactical error of my life. I surrendered. 5 years ago, I was Captain Millie Cook. I was stationed at Fort Campbell, commanding a logistics unit of 120 soldiers. I was respected. I was powerful. But Grant White, with his charming southern drawl and his promises of a soft life, had disarmed me more effectively than any enemy combatant. "You have served your country enough, Millie," he had whispered, his hands warm on my shoulders. "Let me take care of you now. Let me build an empire for us. You just manage the home front." I believed him. I filed my discharge papers. I traded my combat boots for heels and my fatigues for aprons. But the moment I stepped out of the army, the steel trap snapped shut. It started slowly, framed as love and protection. First, he suggested we close my separate bank accounts to simplify our taxes. Then, my credit cards were replaced with a joint card that had a humiliatingly low spending limit. Grant began to audit my grocery receipts like an IRS agent hunting for fraud. "Millie, did we really need the brand name detergent?" he would ask, circling a $3 item with a red pen. "We are building wealth, sweetheart. Every penny counts." He turned a woman who used to manage millions of dollars in military assets into a child who had to ask for cash to buy tampons. It was not a partnership. It was a hostage situation disguised as a marriage. And the warden of this prison was my mother-in-law, Lydia. We lived in a sprawling $3 million estate overlooking the Cumberland River. It was beautiful, manicured, and utterly soulless. Lydia ran the White Hope Charity Foundation, but she ran my home like a correctional facility. She forbade me from getting a job. "A white woman does not work for others, Millie," she would say, sipping her iced tea. It looks desperate. It embarrasses Grant. Yet, while I wasn't allowed to work for a salary, I was expected to work for them. I became the unpaid maid. I scrubbed the marble floors because the cleaning service missed spots. I was silenced at dinner parties because, according to Lydia, men do not like women who are too opinionated about politics. Day by day, they stripped away my rank, my voice, and my dignity. But the moment that finally broke me, the moment the glass didn't just crack, but shattered, was my 37th birthday. Grant had insisted on throwing a lavish garden party. He invited half of Nashville's high society, real estate developers, local politicians, and members of the country club. I wore a dress I had owned for 3 years because I was afraid to ask for money for a new one. I moved through the crowd, smiling until my jaw ached, playing the role of the grateful wife. When it was time for gifts, Lydia took the microphone on the patio stage. She gave a speech about family values and devotion, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary southern sweetness that masks pure venom. "And for our dear Millie," she announced, her voice booming over the speakers. "A little something practical for our devoted homemaker." She handed me a thin white envelope in front of 50 guests. My hands trembled as I opened it. I pulled out a plastic card. It was a gift card to Target. I looked at the amount written in Sharpie on the back, $25. "I thought it would be useful, dear," Lydia said loudly into the microphone, beaming. "You can pick up some nice soap, or perhaps some paper towels for the kitchen." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. It wasn't warm laughter, it was mocking. $25. That was the value they placed on my dignity. That was the price tag of my self-worth in the white family. I stood there, clutching that plastic card, burning with a humiliation so hot it felt like a sunburn. If you have ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to love you, please hit the like button and comment, "I am worthy," below. Let's show the world that our value is not decided by others. I forced a smile, excused myself, and walked toward the house, desperate for air. But I didn't go inside. I stopped near the heavy velvet curtains of the sunroom, intending to hide. That was when I saw them through the glass doors. Grant was standing in the shadows of the rose garden. He was not alone. He was with Claire, the 22-year-old girl he had introduced that morning as his new executive assistant. I watched, frozen, as Grant pulled a small black velvet box from his jacket pocket. It wasn't a Target gift card. He opened it to reveal a Cartier love bracelet, gold, studded with diamonds. I knew exactly how much that bracelet cost, because I had looked at it in magazines for years. $5,000. He fastened it onto Claire's wrist with a gentleness he hadn't shown me in years. He kissed the inside of her wrist, looking at her with a mix of hunger and reverence. "Happy birthday, baby," I heard him murmur through the open window. "Thank you for making me feel alive again." The math was simple, brutal, and undeniable. $25 for the wife who scrubbed his floors and kept his secrets. $5,000 for the girl who warmed his bed on business trips. In that dark corner behind the curtains, something inside me died. The submissive, frightened housewife took her last breath. But as I watched the diamonds sparkle on the wrist of the other woman, something else woke up. A dormant part of my brain, trained in strategy and warfare, flickered back to life. My breathing shifted. My tears stopped instantly. My posture straightened. I was no longer a victim. I was an operative behind enemy lines. Target identification. Grant White, my mind whispered. Status, hostile. I slipped the Target gift card into my pocket. I would use it. But not for paper towels. I would use it to buy the first supply of notebooks I needed to document his downfall. The opportunity for a counterstrike did not arrive with a bang, but with the heavy thud of a leather briefcase hitting the floor. It was a Tuesday night, shortly after 2 a.m. Grant stumbled through the front door, reeking of expensive scotch and cigar smoke. He had been at a fundraising gala for a local senator, or so he claimed. In reality, his shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and there was a faint smear of lipstick on his neck that certainly did not belong to me. He didn't even make it to the bedroom. He collapsed onto the living room sofa, snoring within seconds. In the military, we call this a catastrophic security breach. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching him. My heart was not racing with heartbreak anymore. It was beating with the steady rhythm of a predator spotting wounded prey. I descended the stairs silently, my bare feet making no sound on the hardwood. I approached the target. Grant was out cold. His briefcase, usually locked and guarded like the nuclear football, was lying open on the rug where it had fallen. I held my breath and knelt. My hands moved with practiced precision. I didn't rummage. I surgically extracted a stack of papers that had slid halfway out. Most were boring construction permits, but near the bottom, I found a bank statement. It wasn't from his usual bank in Nashville. It was from a bank in the Cayman Islands. My eyes scanned the lines in the dim moonlight. One transfer stood out. $180,000. Sent to Haven Sun Holdings, Panama City. Panama. Grant was a local developer. He built strip malls in Tennessee and condos in Kentucky. Why was he funneling nearly $200,000 into a shell company in a tax haven known for money laundering? My blood ran hot, but my hands stayed cold. This wasn't just tax evasion. This was something darker. I pulled out my phone, snapped 3 clear photos of the document, and slid it back exactly where I found it. The next morning, I initiated reconnaissance by fire. This is a tactic where you fire at a likely enemy position just to see if they shoot back, revealing their location. Grant was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a black coffee and a hangover. I walked in, holding the same bank statement, which I had printed out a copy of and accidentally left on the counter. "Honey," I said, my voice dripping with innocent curiosity. "I found this paper on the floor last night. Is Haven Sun a new vacation resort you are building? Why is the address in Panama?" Grant froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. For a split second, I saw pure panic in his eyes. Then, the mask slammed back into place. He snatched the paper from my hand and crumpled it into a ball. He laughed, a short, condescending sound that was meant to make me feel small. "Millie, please," he sneered, shaking his head. "Don't try to read financial documents. You will just hurt your pretty little head. This is complex international financing for raw materials. It is tax optimization, not a resort." He stood up, towering over me, using his height to intimidate. "You stick to making the grocery list and keeping the house clean. Leave the thinking to the men who actually make the money. Now, make me some eggs." He dismissed me. He thought he had crushed my curiosity with his arrogance. Fatal error, I thought as I cracked eggs into the skillet. He thinks I am stupid. That is his weakness. By dismissing me, he gave me permission to be invisible. And invisible is exactly what a spy needs to be. Saturday arrived. The weather was perfect for golf, which meant Grant would be at the Belle Meade Country Club for at least 4 hours. It was time to infiltrate the Red Zone, his home office. Grant had a strict rule. I was never allowed in his office. He claimed it was because he handled sensitive client data. I stood before the heavy oak door. It was unlocked, another sign of his arrogance. He didn't lock the door because he didn't fear me. I slipped inside and sat at his desk. His computer was asleep. I woke it up. A password prompt appeared. I cracked my knuckles. In the Army, we learned that people are creatures of habit. They choose passwords based on what they love most. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our wedding anniversary. Incorrect. I wasn't surprised. I tried the date he founded his company. Incorrect. Then, a sick feeling settled in my stomach. I typed in the numbers 0, 8, 1, 2. August 12th, Claire's birthday. Click. The screen unlocked. The humiliation stung like a slap, but I pushed it aside. I was in. I didn't have much time. I plugged in a high-speed USB drive I'd bought with cash 2 days ago. I navigated straight to a folder named Sun Project. My eyes widened as I opened a random PDF. It was a chaotic web of financial crimes. But the centerpiece was a document authorizing the transfer of funds from the White Hope Charity Foundation to the Panamanian account. At the bottom of the page, there were 2 signatures. One was Grant's. The other belonged to my mother-in-law, Lydia. I felt nauseous. They were using a charity, a foundation that claimed to help orphans to launder dirty money. And there, listed as the director of the shell company in Panama, was a familiar name, Claire Davis. It was a perfect criminal triangle. The mother provides the cover, the husband moves the money, and the mistress holds the offshore accounts. Copying. 45%, 60%. The progress bar crawled across the screen. Suddenly, I heard the crunch of gravel on the driveway. A car engine. Grant wasn't supposed to be back for 2 more hours. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird. Come on, 90%, 100%. I yanked the USB drive out. I closed the windows, put the computer back to sleep, and wiped the mouse with the edge of my sleeve to remove fingerprints. I slipped out of the office and made it to the laundry room just as the front door opened. "Millie," Grant shouted from the hallway, "I forgot my lucky putter." I walked out with a basket of folded towels, my face a mask of calm boredom. Inside my pocket, my hand clutched the small silver drive. It was burning against my thigh. "It's in the garage, Grant," I said flatly. He didn't even look at me as he rushed past. He had no idea. He thought he was just grabbing a golf club. He didn't know that his wife, the woman he told to stick to grocery lists, had just seized the key to his prison cell. The cell phone in my purse felt like a radioactive isotope. I knew Grant had installed tracking software on it months ago under the guise of family safety, but I now understood it for what it was, a digital leash. I could not use it. Not for this. I drove my beat-up sedan to the outskirts of town, parking at a dilapidated gas station off the interstate. I pulled a baseball cap low over my eyes, shielding my face from the security cameras that buzzed overhead. My hands dug into my pocket, retrieving a handful of quarters I'd been hoarding from the grocery change. The payphone was grimy, smelling of stale tobacco and gasoline. I dropped the coins into the slot, clink, 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 and dialed a number I had memorized 10 years ago. "Special Agent Pierce," a deep voice answered on the second ring. "Marlin," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "It is Captain Cook." There was a pause. A heavy silence hung on the line for a heartbeat, then 2. Marlin Pierce had been a 22-year-old sergeant under my command in Afghanistan. I had written his recommendation letter for the FBI Academy myself. He was one of the few men I knew who understood the meaning of honor. "Captain," his voice shifted instantly from bureaucratic detachment to sharp alertness. "It has been a long time. Is everything all right? I need a meeting, off the record, immediately." "Name the place," he said without hesitation. "The parking lot of the Starlight Diner on Route 41, 2300 hours. I will be there." The rain in Nashville that night was relentless. It battered the windshield of my car, blurring the neon lights of the diner into streaks of red and blue. At exactly 11 o'clock at night, a nondescript black sedan pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. Marlin was older now, the lines around his eyes deeper, but the intelligence in his gaze was exactly as I remembered. I stepped out of my car and into his. The interior smelled of coffee and old leather. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the silver USB drive. It felt heavy in my palm, heavier than its physical weight should allow. "Grant thinks he's just hiding assets from a divorce," I said quietly. But I found this. Marlin took the drive and plugged it into a ruggedized laptop. The screen flickered to life, casting a blue glow over his face. I watched him read. For 5 minutes, the only sound was the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof and the clicking of his keyboard. His expression hardened. He took off his wire-rimmed glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. When he looked at me, there was no pity in his eyes, only a grim professional respect. "Millie," he said, dropping the formalities, "do you have any idea what you are holding?" "Tax evasion?" I guessed. "This is not just tax evasion," Marlin said, turning the screen toward me. He pointed to a series of transfers routed through Panama to Mexico. "These shell companies? They are known fronts for the Sinaloa cartel. Grant is not just hiding money, he's washing it. Your husband is laundering millions of dollars for drug traffickers through his real estate developments." The air left my lungs. I thought Grant was a greedy, arrogant cheat. I didn't know he was a monster. If the Bureau moves on this now, Marlon continued, his voice low and urgent, Grant goes down. But so do you. Your name is on the joint tax returns. Without proof that you were unaware, the federal prosecutor will view you as a co-conspirator. You are looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. I stared at the rain sliding down the window. 15 years. Ethan would be grown by the time I got out. He would grow up thinking his mother was a criminal. I have two options for you, Marlon said, reaching into his glove box. Option 1, you walk away now, stay silent, and pray we don't catch you when we raid the house in 6 months. Option 2, you become a confidential informant. You work for us. He opened a small black case. Inside lay a pen. It looked like a standard, expensive ballpoint pen, the kind real estate agents use to sign contracts. It has a microphone and a camera with a 12-hour battery life, Marlon explained. If you agree, you wear this. You get him to talk. You get him to admit that you knew nothing about the laundering. You get him to name the partners. If you do that, I can get you a full immunity deal. You and your son keep the house, the clean assets, and your freedom. But, he added, locking eyes with me, I have to warn you, Captain. If he finds this device, we are 20 minutes away. We cannot save you instantly. You will be alone in that house with a man who is in bed with killers. I thought of Ethan. I thought of his innocent face sleeping in his room, completely unaware that his father's luxury was built on blood. Grant was already poisoning Ethan's mind against me. If I went to prison, Grant would win. He would mold my son into a second version of himself. I could not let that happen. The fear was there, cold and sharp in my stomach. But beneath the fear was something familiar. It was the icy resolve of a soldier accepting a mission. I was not just a housewife anymore. I was the last line of defense for my son. I will do it, I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the car's heater. Marlon nodded slowly. He handed me the pen. Welcome back to the fight, Captain. I took the pen. I clipped it onto the lapel of my coat. It felt significant, a tangible weight against my chest. It was heavier than the M4 carbine rifle I used to carry in the desert. That rifle protected my country. This pen protected my son. I opened the car door and stepped back out into the pouring rain. I was walking back into the lion's den, unarmed and outnumbered. But for the first time in 5 years, I was not afraid. I had a mission. And Grant White had no idea that the spy who would bring down his empire was sleeping in his guest bedroom. My home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a minefield, and I was walking through it without a map. For the next 3 weeks, I lived with a loaded weapon clipped to my chest. It wasn't a gun, but the sleek, black ballpoint pen Marlon had given me. I wore it everywhere. I clipped it to my apron while I cooked, to my blouse while I vacuumed, and to my pajamas when I sat on the couch in the evenings. Every moment was a test of nerves. Every time Grant walked into a room, my heart would hammer against my ribs, terrified that the tiny invisible indicator light might blink, or that he would notice the lens that was smaller than a pinhead. Grant was becoming paranoid. He could sense a shift in the air, even if he couldn't pinpoint the source. He started coming home at odd hours, testing me. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was chopping onions for a pot roast, he appeared silently in the kitchen doorway. "Who are you talking to?" he asked, his voice low and suspicious. I hadn't heard him come in. My hand froze for a fraction of a second, the knife hovering over a slice of white onion. I forced my muscles to relax. I resumed chopping, thud, 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 with a steady rhythmic cadence. "Just my mother, Grant," I said, not turning around. "Her sciatica is acting up again. She needs money for medication." "Tell her to get on Medicare," he scoffed, walking to the fridge to grab a beer. "I'm not a charity." I exhaled slowly. The lie had worked, but the pressure was suffocating. 2 days later, the stakes got higher. I was dusting the bookshelves in the living room, running a microfiber cloth over the knickknacks Lydia had insisted we display. My hand brushed against a porcelain teddy bear with glass eyes. Something caught the light. It was a tiny, unnatural glint inside the bear's left eye. I froze. I leaned in closer, squinting. It wasn't just glass. Deep inside the pupil was a lens. A camera. A cold chill raked down my spine. Grant had installed a hidden camera in our living room. It was a nanny cam, the kind people use to catch abusive babysitters, but we didn't have a nanny. We didn't have a baby. He was watching me. My first instinct was to rip it off the shelf and smash it against the wall. But the training kicked in. Counterintelligence rule number 1. If the enemy wants to see, let them see exactly what you want them to see. If I destroyed it, he would know I was hiding something. So I began the performance of a lifetime. Every afternoon, I would sit on the sofa, directly in the camera's field of view. I would turn on the television and watch mindless reality shows about rich housewives fighting over parties. I would eat ice cream directly from the carton. I would sometimes weep into a pillow, loud and pathetic. I gave him the show he wanted. I showed him a broken, depressed, useless woman who was too busy feeling sorry for herself to be a threat. But the real work happened at the dinner table. On Friday night, the Devil's Alliance gathered. Lydia and Claire came over for dinner. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I pinned the pen to the collar of my black dress, double-checked that it was recording, and stepped into the dining room. I served them perfectly seared ribeye steaks and poured expensive Cabernet Sauvignon, acting more like a waitress than the lady of the house. As the wine flowed, so did their tongues. Grant was in a celebratory mood. The new zoning permits for the riverfront project came through, Grant boasted, swirling his wine glass. It is going to be the perfect washing machine. By the time the IRS looks at the books, the cash from our friends south of the border will be cleaner than this tablecloth. My heart skipped a beat. Got you. He had just admitted to money laundering on tape. Claire giggled, touching his arm. And I will be the director of operations, right, baby? Just like we planned? Of course, Grant grinned, his eyes glassy with alcohol. You are the face of the operation, Claire. Beauty and brains. Lydia cut into her steak, chewing slowly. She looked at me standing by the sideboard with a pitcher of water. Well, at least someone in this family is useful, she sneered. Unlike Millie, look at her, standing there like a statue. It is embarrassing, Grant. I don't know why you haven't kicked her to the curb yet. Soon, Mother, Grant promised, once the assets are transferred. The pen recorded every word, every insult, every confession. They were digging their own graves with their mouths. Suddenly, Grant pushed his chair back. Millie, come here. Panic surged through me. Did he see the light? Did he suspect? I walked over to him, my legs feeling like lead. He reached out and yanked me onto his lap. His hand slid up my chest, his fingers brushing against the fabric of my dress, inches away from the pen. My breath stopped. If his finger moved 1 inch to the left, he would feel the hard plastic casing. He would know. And I would be dead. But he didn't grab the pen. He grabbed my chin. He kissed me, hard and sloppy, tasting of wine and cruelty. Then he pulled back, whispering into my ear so everyone could hear. You have been a good girl lately, Millie. So quiet, so obedient. If you keep this up, I might consider raising your grocery allowance by $50 next month. The table erupted in laughter. Lydia cackled. Claire smirked behind her napkin. He wasn't looking for a wire. He was just flexing his power. He was love-bombing me, using a tiny crumb of kindness mixed with control to keep me submissive. I forced myself to smile. I forced myself to say, "Thank you, Grant." I stood up and walked to the kitchen to fetch dessert. As soon as the swinging door closed behind me, I leaned against the counter and dry heaved. The disgust was physical. I wanted to scrub my skin with bleach, but I touched the pen. It was still there. The evidence was safe. Laugh now, I thought, listening to their cackles from the other room. Laugh while you can. Because I am doing this for Ethan. And for freedom. The sound of a 2-stroke engine shattering the afternoon silence was the first warning. It wasn't the hum of a lawnmower. It was the aggressive, high-pitched whine of a dirt bike. I ran to the front window. In the driveway, my 14-year-old son, Ethan, was straddling a brand-new, bright blue Yamaha dirt bike. He was revving the engine, his face flushed with an intoxication that had nothing to do with adrenaline and everything to do with power. Standing next to him, arms crossed over his chest and grinning like a conquering king, was Grant. I threw open the front door and marched out. "Grant, what is this?" "We discussed this, I told you, absolutely not. It is too dangerous for a 14-year-old to ride in this subdivision." Grant didn't even turn to look at me. He just winked at Ethan. "See, I told you. Here comes the fun police." Ethan laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that didn't belong in a child's throat. "Mom, chill out," Ethan snapped, revving the engine again, sending a cloud of exhaust fumes into my face. "Dad bought it for me. It's a gift." "It is a death trap," I said, my voice rising. I reached for the handlebars to turn the ignition off. "Ethan, get off the bike, now." Grant stepped between us. He used his height to tower over me, blocking my path to our son. "Back off, Millie. Stop babying the boy. He's a white man. He needs to learn to be brave, not a coward like his mother. Let him ride." He turned to Ethan. "Go on, son. Do a lap. Ignore her." Ethan tore out of the driveway, the tires screeching on the asphalt. I watched him go, my heart in my throat, terrified he would crash. But what scared me more was the look Grant gave me. It was the look of a man who knew he had just bought his son's loyalty for the price of a few $1,000s. Later that evening, I tried to do damage control. I went up to Ethan's room. He was lying on his bed, still wearing his motocross boots, scrolling on his phone. "Ethan," I said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I'm not trying to be mean. I just worry about your safety. Your father shouldn't have gone behind my back." Ethan sat up abruptly. He shoved my hand off the mattress as if my touch burned him. "Stop it," he shouted. "Stop trying to ruin everything." I recoiled. "Ethan." He stood up, his face twisted in a sneer that was a terrifying replica of his father's. "Dad told me everything, Mom. He told me why you are always angry. He told me you are just jealous." "Jealous?" I whispered, stunned. "Yeah, because Dad is successful and you are nothing." Ethan spat the words out. "Dad earns all the money. He built this house, and you just sit around and complain. Dad says you are planning to divorce him so you can steal his money. He says you are a gold digger." The air left the room. Gold digger. My son. The boy I had nursed through fevers, the boy I had taught to read, the boy I was currently risking federal prison to save, was looking at me with pure hatred. "Ethan, that is not true," I said, my voice trembling. "Your father is lying to you." "Liar!" Ethan screamed, his eyes wet with angry tears. "You are the liar. You are useless. Dad is the only one who cares about me. Get out. Get out of my room." He picked up a pillow and threw it at me. It hit me in the chest with a soft thud, but it felt like a sledgehammer. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. I wanted to yell, "Your father is washing money for drug cartels. Your father is a criminal. I am working with the FBI to save us." But I couldn't. I had signed the agreement. I was under strict orders from Agent Pierce. If I blew my cover, Grant would destroy the evidence, flee the country, or worse, he might hurt Ethan to silence me. I had to swallow the poison. I had to let my son believe I was the villain so that I could be his savior. I backed out of the room, closing the door as Ethan cranked up his music to drown me out. I walked down the hall to the master bedroom, past Grant, who was sitting in his armchair reading the Wall Street Journal. He didn't look up, but I saw the smirk playing on his lips. He heard the screaming. He knew he had won. I went into the master bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the shower, cranking the handle all the way to the right until the water was scalding hot. The room filled with steam. Only then, under the roar of the water, did I let myself slide down the tiled wall to the floor. I pressed my hands over my mouth to muffle the sound of my sobbing. The pain was physical. It felt as if Grant had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out, only to feed it to our son. He was turning Ethan into a monster. He was using parental alienation as a weapon of war. If you are a mother who has ever had to be the bad guy to protect your child, or if you've ever been painted as the villain while doing all the work. Please hit the like button and comment Mama Bear below. Let me know I'm not alone in this fight. I sat there for 20 minutes, letting the hot water run, letting the steam hide my tears. But as the tears dried, something else took their place. I stood up and wiped the condensation off the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, but the woman staring back at me was not broken. She was furious. Grant White had made a fatal mistake. He thought that by turning Ethan against me, he would break my spirit. He didn't understand a mother's love. He didn't understand that I would walk through hell to save my son, even if I had to burn Grant's empire to the ground to do it. No, I whispered to my reflection. I will not let you take him. You can have the money. You can have the house. But you will not have his soul. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out the black pen. I unscrewed the bottom half, revealing the tiny data port. Tonight, I wouldn't just record a conversation. Tonight, I was going to plant the final piece of evidence that Marlon needed to get the arrest warrant. Grant wanted a war. He just drafted a soldier who had nothing left to lose. In the world of high-stakes crime, it is rarely the masterminds who bring the whole house of cards down. It is usually the intern, or, in my husband's case, the mistress. Grant had made a classic tactical error born of arrogance. He didn't trust professional accountants with the true depths of his illegal activities because he feared blackmail. Instead, he trusted Claire. He believed that because she was sleeping with him, she was loyal. And he believed that because she was young and eager, she was competent. He was wrong on both counts. Claire was pretty, yes, but she was also the kind of person who used password 123 for her login credentials. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee and logging into the joint family email account on my iPad. This account was usually a graveyard of utility bills, country club newsletters, and spam from luxury car dealerships. Grant assumed I only checked it to pay the electric bill. But that morning, a new message popped up in the inbox. Sender, Claire Davis. Subject, VIP client list. October updates. Attachment, Sun Project, Geist Ledger, final.xclsc cells. My heart stopped. Why would Claire send this to the family email? Then I saw the recipient line, and I understood. She had meant to send it to the accountant. But the email software's autofill feature had done its job too well. It saw AC and automatically populated account home instead of accountant firm. And Claire, in her haste or laziness, had hit send without checking. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with the rush of striking gold. I opened the attachment. It wasn't just a list of shell companies, it was the Holy Grail. It was a ledger containing the real names of every investor laundering money through Grant's developments. I recognized names from the news, local politicians, construction magnates, and several names that sounded distinctly like members of the Sinaloa cartel. This was the smoking gun. This was the piece of evidence that linked the money directly to the criminals. I plugged my USB drive into the iPad adapter and downloaded the file. I saved it, encrypted it, and backed it up to a secure cloud server Marlon had set up for me. Then, I faced a choice. The safe move would be to delete the email from the inbox and pretend I never saw it. That would keep my cover intact. But I was done playing safe. I was angry. And I needed them to panic. Panic makes people sloppy. I left the email in the inbox, and I marked it as read. That afternoon, the sun was blazing over Nashville. I walked out to the backyard patio. Claire was there, lounging by the pool in a tiny white bikini, sipping a mimosa. She was wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first car, scrolling through Instagram, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just signed her own death warrant. I walked over and stood directly in front of her, casting a long, dark shadow over her tanning session. She lowered her sunglasses, squinting up at me with annoyance. "Can you move, Millie? You are blocking my sun." I didn't move. I looked down at her with a calm, terrifying pity. "That is a lovely bikini, Claire," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "Enjoy the sun while you can. The yard time in federal prison is only 1 hour a day." She sat up, frowning. Excuse me? What is that supposed to mean? It means you should really check your sent folder, I said, leaning in closer so she could see the cold fire in my eyes. And you should probably learn the difference between accountant and home account before you hit send next time. Her face went pale. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. Oh, and Claire? I added, turning to walk away. The federal sentencing guidelines for conspiracy to commit money laundering carry a mandatory minimum of 10 to 20 years. I hope you look good in orange. I heard the glass shatter behind me. She had dropped her mimosa on the concrete. Grant, she screamed, her voice shrill with terror. Grant, pick up the phone. I walked back into the house, my heart rate steady. The psychological operation, PSYOPS, was a success. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. 20 minutes later, Grant's Mercedes screeched into the driveway. He burst through the door, his face purple with rage and fear. Lydia followed him, looking equally terrified. You idiot! Grant was screaming at Claire, who was sobbing on the patio. How could you be so stupid? Did she see it? Did she download it? I don't know, Claire wailed. She said something about federal prison. We have to move the assets, Lydia hissed, her voice trembling. Right now, tonight, before she talks to anyone. Millie is too dumb to know what she saw, Grant shouted, pacing the living room floor. But we can't take the risk. Call the banker in the Caymans. Tell him to liquidate the Sun accounts. Transfer everything to the crypto wallets. Do it now. I stood in the hallway, unseen, polishing a mirror. The black pen clipped to my blouse was recording every scream, every frantic phone call, and every authorization code they shouted into their phones. By trying to hide the crime, they were creating a fresh trail of evidence. They were documenting their own intent to obstruct justice. Grant thought I was the dumb wife upstairs. He didn't know that every word he spoke was tightening the noose around his own neck. He was digging his own grave with a golden shovel, and I was just there to watch the dirt fall. We were back in the present moment, frozen in the sterile chill of the federal courtroom. The air smelled of floor wax and the stale bourbon on my husband's breath. Grant leaned back in his chair, adjusting his silk tie with a smug satisfaction, already mentally spending the money he believed he had successfully hidden from me. Judge Eleanor Green raised her gavel. The wood hung suspended in the air for a fraction of a second, poised to finalize the divorce decree that would leave me destitute and Grant victorious. Grant smirked at Claire in the gallery, winking at her. They were already celebrating. Your Honor! The voice cut through the silence like a whip crack. It was Mr. Howell, my attorney. He stood up, buttoning his jacket with slow, deliberate movements. If it pleases the court, my client wishes to submit new evidence into the record. Evidence that is material to the financial standing of Mr. White. Grant let out a loud, incredulous laugh. He shook his head, looking at the judge with mock exhaustion. Oh, come on, what is it this time? Did she find an old grocery receipt for milk? Is she asking to be reimbursed for doing the laundry? A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. Even the court reporter cracked a smile. They all saw a desperate, grasping housewife trying to delay the inevitable. I remained silent. I did not look at Grant. I kept my eyes fixed on the bench as I slid the white envelope across the mahogany table toward the clerk, who handed it up to Judge Green. The room went quiet as Judge Green opened the seal. The sound of tearing paper was the only noise in the room. She pulled out the documents. I watched her face. At first she looked annoyed, expecting another frivolous claim. Then her eyebrows knitted together. She flipped a page, then another. Her eyes widened behind her spectacles. Her casual posture vanished, replaced by a rigid, terrifying stillness. She looked at the bank statements bearing the Panamanian seal. She looked at the photos of the ledger. She saw the transcripts of the dinner conversation where Grant admitted to washing the money. And finally, she saw the official stamp of the Federal Bureau of Investigation on the cover letter. Judge Green slowly lifted her head. Her gaze did not land on me. It landed on Grant like a judge's gavel. Mr. White, she said, her voice dropping an octave, cold and dangerous. This file has been authenticated by the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It appears that what started as a civil divorce proceeding has just become a crime scene. The smirk vanished from Grant's face instantly. He blinked, confused. Excuse me? What are you talking about? That woman is crazy. She forged those. I don't think so, Mr. White, the judge replied, closing the file. Before Grant could open his mouth to lie again, the double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open with a deafening boom. Federal agents, nobody move! The shout echoed off the high ceilings. 10 agents in tactical gear poured into the room, their movements synchronized and lethal. They were wearing navy blue windbreakers with bold yellow letters, FBI. Leading the charge was Special Agent Marlon Pierce. He wasn't the young sergeant I'd commanded in the desert anymore. He was the hammer of the United States government. Chaos erupted. Grant White, Lydia White, Claire Davis. Marlon's voice boomed over the commotion. You are under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, and racketeering under the RICO Act. Claire screamed, a high piercing shriek that shattered the dignity of the court. She scrambled backward, knocking over her chair, trying to hide behind a wooden pillar. I didn't do it. I was just the assistant. In the front row, Lydia gasped, clutching her pearls in a performance worthy of an Oscar, before slumping sideways onto the bench in a theatrical faint. No one moved to help her. Grant stood up, his face turning a violent shade of purple. He looked from the agents to the judge, and finally, his wild eyes landed on me. Realization hit him like a freight train. You! He roared, spit flying from his mouth. You bitch! You set me up! I am your husband. I own you. I fed you. He lunged toward me, his hands curled into fists. He never made it. 2 agents tackled him from the side, hitting him with the force of a linebacker. Grant hit the floor hard. Thud, his face pressed against the cold wood. Federal agents, stop resisting! An agent shouted, wrenching Grant's arms behind his back. The room was a whirlwind of shouting, crying, and the metallic click-click-click of handcuffs being secured. But in the center of the storm, I stood perfectly still. I was the eye of the hurricane. I slowly stood up and walked around the table. I stopped inches from where Grant lay pinned to the floor, panting and struggling like a trapped animal. He looked up at me. The arrogance was gone. The cruelty was gone. All that was left was fear. Pure, naked fear. I leaned down, close enough that he could see the resolve in my eyes, but far enough that he couldn't touch me. You didn't feed me, Grant, I whispered, my voice cutting through the noise. You starved me. You imprisoned me. I straightened up, towering over him for the first time in our marriage. And today, I said, loud enough for Claire to hear as she was being dragged out in cuffs, I am liberating myself. Oh, and Grant? Claire can keep the bed. I will sleep much better in a house that doesn't have you in it. Marlon looked at me and gave a sharp nod. He hauled Grant to his feet. Get him out of here, Marlon ordered. As they dragged Grant away, he looked back at me one last time, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had underestimated the useless housewife. He had forgotten that before I was his wife, I was a soldier, and soldiers know how to win wars. The heavy doors swung shut behind him, cutting off his screams. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of victory. The empire of the White family had crumbled, and all it took was one woman with a plan and the courage to execute it. The silence in our new apartment was different from the silence in the mansion. The silence in the mansion had been heavy, filled with secrets and unsaid threats. The silence here, in this cramped 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town, was the silence of a wound trying to close. It had been 1 week since the FBI raided the courtroom. The federal government had seized everything. The mansion on the river, the luxury cars, the bank accounts. All of it was draped in yellow tape, marked as evidence. Grant's empire had dissolved like cotton candy in water. We had nothing left but our clothes and a few boxes of personal items. But for the first time in 5 years, the air I breathed felt clean. However, the collateral damage was severe. My son Ethan had locked himself in his bedroom for 3 days. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't spoken. He had simply walked into the small room, shut the door, and turned off the lights. He was grieving. Not for his father, but for the image of his father. He was mourning the hero he thought he knew, the man who had bought him dirt bikes and told him he was a king. I didn't try to force the door open. I didn't yell. I simply placed a tray of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, his favorite comfort food, on the floor outside his room. Then I sat down on the hallway floor, leaning my back against the painted wood of his door. I pulled my knees to my chest and began to talk. I didn't talk about the divorce. I didn't talk about Grant's crimes. I talked about the dessert. You know, Ethan, I whispered to the closed door, when I was deployed, there were nights so dark you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. We were scared. We were tired. But we never left a soldier behind. No matter how bad it got, we stayed. And I am staying right here. I am not going anywhere. I sat there for hours, just breathing in rhythm with him on the other side of the wood. On the night of the 4th day, I heard the lock click. The door creaked open slowly. Ethan stood in the threshold. He looked terrible. His face was pale and gaunt, his eyes swollen from days of crying. He was wearing the same t-shirt he had worn to court. He looked down at me, his lip trembling. "Mom," he croaked, his voice cracking. I saw the news on my phone. They said Dad stole money from Grandma's. They said he helped bad men hurt people. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor. Yes, baby. The news is true. Ethan looked at me with a devastation so profound it broke my heart all over again. He lied to me. He told me you were the bad one. He told me you betrayed us. He was trying to protect himself, Ethan. He used you as a shield. Ethan took a step forward. He looked small again, not like the arrogant teenager on the dirt bike, but like my little boy. I called you useless, he whispered, fresh tears spilling over his cheeks. I called you a gold digger. I'm so sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. I didn't let him finish. I pulled him into my arms, holding him tighter than I had ever held anything in my life. He buried his face in my shoulder and sobbed, his whole body shaking with the release of the poison Grant had injected into him. It is okay, I murmured into his hair, rocking him back and forth. It is not your fault. You were a victim too. But it is over now. No more lies, no more secrets. We start over, just you and me. We stood there in the hallway of that cheap apartment for a long time, letting the tears wash away the toxicity of the White family legacy. The next morning, the final ghost of the past arrived. My lawyer stopped by to drop off some paperwork. Along with the files, he handed me a sealed envelope. It is from the county jail, he said quietly. From Grant. You don't have to read it. I took the letter. The handwriting was jagged and frantic. I sat at the small kitchen table and tore it open. I expected an apology. I expected remorse. Instead, I found one last attempt at manipulation. Millie, the letter read, you have to help me. If you talk to the prosecutor, if you tell them I was coerced, they might reduce the sentence. If you don't help me, I will have nothing to live for. Do you want my blood on your hands? Do you want Ethan to know his mother let his father die in a cage? You owe me this. I made you who you are. Even from behind bars, wearing an orange jumpsuit, he was still trying to control me. He was threatening suicide to make me feel guilty. He was gaslighting me one last time, trying to make me responsible for his choices. I felt a flash of anger, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, calm clarity. I made you who you are. No, Grant, I said aloud to the empty kitchen. You didn't make me. You tried to break me, and you failed. I stood up and walked to the kitchen sink. I struck a match. The flame flared to life, bright and orange. I held the corner of the letter to the fire. I watched the paper curl and blacken. I watched his desperate, manipulative words turn into ash. I held it until the heat kissed my fingertips. Then I dropped it into the stainless steel sink. I turned on the faucet. The water rushed out, swirling the black ash down the drain. It disappeared into the darkness of the pipes, gone forever. I did not forgive Grant White for what he did to me. I would never forgive him for what he did to our son. But as I watched the last of the ash wash away, I forgave myself. I forgave myself for loving him once. I forgave myself for staying too long. I forgave myself for believing the lie that I was weak. The drain gurgled, clearing the sink. It was clean. I turned off the water, dried my hands, and looked out the window. Ethan was sitting on the balcony, reading a book in the sunlight. He looked up and smiled at me, a real, tentative, hopeful smile. I smiled back. The war was over, the rebuilding had begun. 1 year later, the smell of fresh lemon polish filled the air, a scent that used to remind me of servitude, but now smelled like pride. I stood in the hallway of a modest brick building in downtown Nashville, holding a microfiber cloth. I gently wiped a smudge off the brand-new brass plaque mounted next to the frosted glass door. The letters were engraved in bold, black serif font, Cook Defense and Consulting. Underneath, in smaller letters, it read, Financial and Legal Strategy for Post-Divorce Recovery. I stepped back to admire it. I had not used a single cent of Grant's dirty money to build this. Every asset the White family owned had been seized by the federal government during the asset forfeiture process. Grant was currently serving year 1 of a 20-year sentence in a federal penitentiary in Atlanta. This office was built on my Army pension, which I had finally reclaimed, and a small business administration loan that I had secured with my own credit score. It wasn't a multi-million-dollar empire, but it was mine. It was clean. It was honest. I opened the door and walked into the reception area. It was small, painted a calming shade of sage green. Sitting in one of the waiting chairs was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was clutching a designer handbag as if it were a life preserver, her knuckles white. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes, and she jumped slightly when the door clicked shut. I stopped. For a heartbeat, I didn't see a stranger. I saw myself, sitting in that courtroom 1 year ago, terrified and isolated. I saw the same tremor in her hands, the same look of a woman who had been told she was useless so many times she had started to believe it. I didn't walk behind my desk to create distance. I walked straight over to her and sat in the chair opposite hers. Mrs. Reynolds, I asked softly. She nodded, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. I don't have access to the accounts, she stammered, rehearsing the apology she probably gave her husband every day. He says I'm bad with numbers. He says if I leave, he will crush me. I reached out and placed my hand over hers. My grip was firm, transmitting the strength she didn't know she had. Look at me, I said, dropping my voice to the command tone I used to use in the barracks. You are not bad with numbers. You are being gaslighted, and you are not alone anymore. She looked up, startled by the certainty in my voice. I was where you are, I told her. I know the script he is using because I lived it, but we are going to rewrite it. You are a warrior, Mrs. Reynolds. You have just forgotten how to use your weapon. We are going to find it together. A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. A tiny spark, but it was enough to start a fire. That look was better than any paycheck. That was my legacy. I wasn't just surviving, I was building an army of women who would never be victims again. Later that afternoon, the office door swung open again. Special delivery, a voice called out. Ethan walked in, dropping his backpack on the sofa. At 15, he had shot up 3 inches. The baby fat was gone from his face, replaced by a jawline that was becoming defined. But the biggest change wasn't physical. It was in his eyes. The entitlement was gone, replaced by a quiet maturity. He wasn't wearing designer sneakers. He was wearing work boots, scuffed at the toes. Hey, Mom, he said, moving to the filing cabinet. I finished my homework. Do you want me to organize the new client files? That would be a huge help, soldier, I smiled, watching him sort through the paperwork with efficient, careful hands. He wasn't asking for a dirt bike. He wasn't demanding an allowance. For the past 6 months, Ethan had been mowing lawns in our apartment complex and walking dogs on weekends. He was learning the value of $1 earned through sweat, not fraud. When he finished filing, he leaned against the desk, wiping his hands on his jeans. So I was thinking, It's Friday. How about pizza tonight? There is that new place on 2nd Avenue. I reached for my purse. Sounds great. Let me get my wallet. No. Ethan stopped me, grinning. He pulled a crumpled $20 bill and a handful of singles from his pocket. I got this. Mrs. Johnson paid me for cleaning her gutters today. My treat. I looked at the crumpled bills in his hand. They were worth more to me than the $3 million mansion ever was. I had saved him. Grant had tried to turn our son into a clone of his own greed, but we had broken the cycle. Okay, I said, my throat tight with emotion. You buy, I drive. That evening, I drove us home. The sun was setting over Nashville, casting a long golden glow over the Cumberland River. I pulled the car over to the shoulder for a moment, rolling down the window. The wind whipped through my hair, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and river water. I looked out at the water, thinking about the woman I used to be. The woman who stood behind velvet curtains, watching her husband give diamonds to his mistress, feeling like she was worth $25. I remembered Grant's whisper in the courtroom. You will never touch a dime of my money again. He was right. I would never touch his money again. I didn't need to. I had my own money. I had my own name. I had my son's respect. And most importantly, I had my freedom. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet air of a life I'd built with my own 2 hands. The campaign was over. The enemy was defeated. And for Captain Millie Cook, life was just beginning. I put the car in gear and drove toward the horizon, not looking back. Before I sign off, I want to leave you with one crucial thought. For years, I believed the lie that my value was tied to my husband's approval and his bank account. I thought my time as a leader was dead and buried. Maybe you feel that way too, trapped by a relationship, a job, or simply by age. But here is the truth. Your skills, your resilience, and your life experience do not expire. They are not wasted years. They are training for your comeback. Whether you are 38 or 68, the strength you need is already inside you, waiting to be reactivated. Never let anyone convince you that you are too old or too broken to write a new chapter. You are your own rescue team. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you feel that rush of absolute satisfaction when the handcuffs finally clicked on Grant's wrists? If my story ignited a spark in you, please hit the like button right now. It helps more women find this message of hope. And if you are ready for more stories about justice, resilience, and turning the tables on those who underestimate us, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Tell me in the comments below, what is one difficult thing you have survived that made you stronger? I want to read your stories. Let's build a community of survivors right here.